I'm going to be focusing on team aspects, not a lot of individual stuff compared to other VODs, but should be good to get some insight. Again, we've been following up with this team a couple times now, so it'd be good to see if they're able to analyze some of the situations themselves, whether or not they're able to provide some of their own feedback based on some of the things we've talked about in the past, as well as hopefully clean up some of the things we've seen in the past as well. So let's get them in a call. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going, guys?
I was just asking if we were gonna join in, and then as I was asking,
We all get
you
yoinked.
brought us in.
Yeah, I need to figure out a better system
I was
for
like,
this,
oh,
but
all right.
right now it's just yoinking people up. How you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Good. How about you?
Good.
Good.
So yeah, here, let me start streaming over Discord.
Okay.
All right, that should be working.
Yeah, good job. Nice.
Everything look good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, so yeah, I think let's just jump into it. So yeah, anything? This was you guys submitted this VOD at the same time as our last one, but it's been a couple days since we looked at that last one. So anything you guys remember from this one? I know it's from a while ago, from this map that you want to bring up before we get into it.
I just know it was a good match. One thing I did want to ask you before we got started is obviously we're not Overwatch League, so like in Overwatch League, they'll set up on the high ground always, or they'll set up like pre-fights they set up. In our elo, they set by the truck. What's the ideal? Like, I know the ideal probably is the high ground, but how do we kind of like? I don't want to say how do we counter, how do we combat that? Because they're not going to be coming at us like normal, like a pro would. Like, how do we? Because I know the truck isn't ideal, but I feel like if we play back so far, the way our people play at our elo, that we give them all this free space.
Right.
So, like, how do we kind of counter that to where we are starting to sort of play, like the pros in the sense of using their same positioning and ideas?
So, okay, this is kind of a bit of a long question, but we'll break it down.
Sorry.
So, no, it's good. It's good content. It's good content. So first, we're going to look at why pros want to favor these types of high grounds, right? When they're holding, like they'll have like maybe an Ash Mercy up here. If they're playing shields, maybe they'll hold their shield here with a backline shooting down the choke, or they'll have like snipers back here, stuff like that. So why, as you're saying, give up all this space at the choke, given that it is a 2CP map? They do have to come through this choke in order to take any amount of space, unless they do something cheeky around the flank. Why ignore this big choke point and this potential to hit them in favor of taking this such defensive ground? That's like the first part of the question, right?
Yeah. So,
number one thing, yes, choke point pressure is very, very important, but consider the ground you'll be working with if they manage to subvert the choke. So if you compare this to a map like Temple of Anubis, it's going to be hard to compare visually, but there's like the little platform, there's like the choke, and they can go either left or right. But by holding this platform, you're able to spam the choke, and then they still have to move past you through the platform. If you're here in Volskaya, and you're holding left or right side of this truck, and people get past you, they can now completely ignore you on part of the choke point. And in fact, they're essentially flipping the map and turning you into the attackers, and you need to fight your way. You need to fight your way back onto the point from low ground, from low flank pressure, from no high ground pressure, and most likely exposed backline. So if you consider heroes like Ball, Winston, D.Va, Tracer, Genji, Doomfist, Symmetra if she takes a TP, Widow if she goes on this angle, there's a lot of tools. Sombra is another one I should have mentioned. A lot of tools for people to get through these chokes. It's not the most oppressive choke, and you're not able to hold it without basically giving up free space. So if you have your tanks on this ground, they're forced to play on this ground and then take the fight here, which can be good. But if anything gets past them, if anything that pulls their attention back to point, they have to fight for space once again. They're not already at an advantage when it comes to the point, when it comes to fighting on point. Compare that to if you have tanks up here and you've got like a backline you're protecting, like an Ana or a Zen or a Widow or an Ashe or whatever, whoever's up here, someone important that you want to hold this position with, yes, you're not going to get as much pressure here. They're going to be able to take these flanks. They're going to be able to get up here, but they're not going to be able to touch the point for free. And that's the biggest part of Volskaya first point, is whether or not you can take an appropriate fight on point. So the question then becomes whether or not you commit resources, forcing yourself to try and win something here. And if you lose something here, whether you take trades, you lose a tank, and then you're forced to give up space, and then you don't have any resources to really take up fight on point. And if they, for example, take the high ground here, there's nothing you as the tanks on the ground here can really do, unless you're playing Winston defense or stuff like that, you know?
Okay.
So that's one thing. And then, so like I said, when you have tanks here protecting a backline, you'll keep that backline safe for longer. And the longer they're up shooting for people on the point, I should have mentioned at the beginning this is assuming a team comp somewhat like this with like a hit scan main DPS and like low mobility tanks, right? Well, if you're playing like a dive defense, it kind of changes everything. But when you have these characters that are high priority in the middle of a fight, like Ashe and Ana, it's much better for them to be up here during the middle of the fight than for them to be, say, forced into the mega pack if you were to start here and then cut back to point. They're just have better sight lines, safer from enemy flankers. Like, yes, they can still come up here, but if they're forced through a choke, versus being basically having no pressure over the point, very limited line of sight, open to flank routes, open to enemy DPS taking better ground, and limiting the space that your tanks can work with. So, yes, the fight here will be favored for defenders, but if for whatever reason the attackers can get past that, either by using flankers, which is why you see dive so prevalent in the Overwatch League on this map. Like even when Hog was super meta, a lot of teams ran ball just to get through this choke. Then there's nothing for these people to work with realistically. And you're asking a lot for DPS, for example, if you have an Ashe Mercy up here, for them to be able to stay up here while your tanks are kind of just here and then forcing themselves way back to point. Where does this Ashe then go? She's forced to fall back to her tanks, forced to play inside this cubby, stuff like that. Versus playing up here, yes, you're not going to get the same choke pressure, but you're going to have a longer uptime and be more effective throughout a longer engage, which is generally more important on this point. That's kind of what makes Volskaya a bit different than other 2CP maps, and it's what makes it my favorite 2CP map, is that it's not all about this choke point. It is about more the map and the extended engage. So another part of your question was how do we handle giving up this space, right? As the defenders, if you are, say we're playing Ryan, Ashe, Ana back here, how do we handle flankers coming up here, flankers coming up here, flankers coming over here? My biggest tip in these kind of situations would definitely just be don't panic, honestly. You can give up this space without it meaning too much for the attackers. They're still going to be forced at some point to come to the point or to come into you to force you out of position. So there is some worry about, like, against a full dive team, having exposed backline to like these big wide setups where they can fully surround you. If you end up dropping, they can hit you on their own point. But in general, when you're holding this space, I would say in general and ranked as well, people will be slow to coordinate these types of coordinated aggression onto this high ground or onto this high ground or wherever it is. And you'll likely find opportunities to go aggressive based on them either splitting or based on them going to the objective too quickly. So what that'll usually look like, say they're running a dive team, they're trying to go over here and they're trying to dive you guys up here. Or they're trying to walk up to here, dive you guys up here. At some point, if they're just running 6 people all together and then trying to dive straight forward 6 people, you should be able to just put your Rhine in front of their face, your backline kites back a little bit, and you handle it no problem. The only time a dive team will be more threatening is when they get split angles on you and they're able to surround you in some sort of way. Because of how wide this map is, ideally, you'll have enough time to scout what's going on, see members splitting. If you see, for example, a Tracer coming up here, a Winston going over here, maybe a hit scan or a Genji or something going this way, an off tank going this way. If you see them in situations where they are split and you can find proper engage timing to engage onto them as they're setting up, because of how wide the map is, it's hard for them to actually regroup and collapse when they're in this sort of pre-fight phase. And then the other option, I guess, if we're talking about just another standard, like Ryan Zarya comp, either they're going to run to point, in which case you should have a ton of uptime shooting into their backline, and their backline's going to have a hard time keeping up, or they're going to try and rush into you and force you off. Again, because of how wide this map is, how long the sight lines are, you should have plenty of time to scout this out, plenty of time to rotate your backline over to this side, stuff like that, and also hit them at this choke with dynamites, with nades, with Ryan being in their face, whatever you want to do, and take an engage on your terms. So again, like, this is possible to do with this choke, but it's not possible versus a dive team or against flankers, and basically you're just covering more bases by holding further back.
Okay.
Does that feel like I've answered your question?
Yeah, thank you. So like the core of the team should be back right, basically, is what you're saying. Like,
it doesn't need to be like strict positioning, but what you need to ask yourself is, how do we take the extended fight and not bank on always taking an advantage at the choke? So if you're holding it here, you're banking on always being able to get the first kill, being able to get a ton of damage in before they cross the choke, right? Being able to always get your ults out whenever you want them, being able to deal with all of their ults. If anything goes wrong in this space, you're working with nothing. Versus if anything goes wrong in this space, one, you got better cover to run to just by being on the high ground. You got better kite routes. And if they don't take the necessary steps to dislodge you, the extended fight is going to be much, much, much better. Because even if they force your tanks to point, you'll be working with this kind of space for your Ashe or your Ana on either side, shooting down onto the point. So again, it doesn't need to be strict, but you need to think about like how you're going to use this fight how you're going to use this space in the extended fight.
Okay.
And yeah, in general, it's going to come down to A or B on one of these high grounds, and you can rotate between them, of course. But most teams you'll see do this, unless they're playing like some like hard bunker or hard rush where they're playing like inside here and then they rush out, stuff like that, or they're playing a dive defense where they play completely spread out around the map. This sort of like standard comp, what we'll call it, generally benefits from holding these high grounds and using Ryan and Zarya to touch the point when you need to, or to drop on people and go aggressive when you see them rotating. Okay. And just making sure these two members have as much uptime as possible.
Gotcha.
So yeah, again, the biggest thing you'd have to worry about from this position, if you're playing like all six here, even, granted, probably Tracer wouldn't be playing there, but if you're playing the majority of people on these high grounds, or maybe like a 2-2 split, where you've got like Ryan and Ana, that's a terrible A. Ryan, Ana, and then like Mercy, Ashe over here, and you can sort of split and get this crossfire in the same way. Then you need to worry about like dealing with multiple flanks at the same time, but again, if they send 6 members in one direction, because of how long your sightlines are, you can rotate them. You can rotate away and then play together, waste their time as much as possible. If they start splitting, hopefully your duos can mark split DPS and stuff like that. You can have Tracer back up whichever side needs help, sort of hit backline as they start rotating, stuff like that. But yeah, just use the space to your advantage by giving up some space, but putting yourselves in a favorable advantage and almost sort of baiting them into the point, baiting them into these poor fight zones for attackers. Because the longer they spend here on the point, the longer they're just going to take free fire from your Ashe, from your Ana, and hopefully find yourselves an advantage to actually go aggressive.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So yeah, basically in a nutshell, if anything goes wrong at the choke, you got nothing. Versus here, you have space to give up, you got space to work with, you got high grounds to use, and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
And again, it doesn't need to be strict in terms of positioning. You don't need to say, like, always play here. It's going to come down to what you see the enemy team is running, what you see them doing on their approach. If they're doing some, like, cheeky sim TP across here, you're probably going to need to get out and give up this space. But it comes down to match to match.
Okay.
So yeah, any other questions about this map before we get started?
I don't have anything.
All right.
3.
So,
ready for battle. 2, 1. Attackers incoming. Defend objective A.
So as we're saying, the blue team here is sort of holding the defensive setup you were talking about, and they're running very spam heavy with a Junkrat. So, on the flip side, how as attackers do we get past something like this? Do you guys remember what we talked about on Gibraltar third point in our last session?
I know you mentioned like taking the high ground, like as the Ashe and stuff, and then just kind of making sure like our position, making sure like our like I know like the Ana was wanting to rotate high ground as well, just trying to or having like pre-fight, like knowing like what our win cons are for before the fight starts. Is that correct?
For sure. So there was two sort of situations I think you guys should be thinking about how to break through space. So whether that's breaking through a choke or on Gibraltar, like breaking around a corner that a defense is holding, if you just stay here and you stagnate versus their defensive setup, you are never going to get through this space, right? The longer you spend just holding shield, the longer you spend using bubbles and trying to get poke in, the more it's going to benefit the defenders because they can use their cooldowns as reactionary to yours rather than having to use it proactively and trying to clear space at the same time that you're trying to go aggressive and all these other things. So what you guys need to do on a team-wide level is one of two things. Either, number one, coordinate big cooldowns together. So stuff like bubbling Rein Zarya to like really bully their Rein and potentially get an HP advantage, potentially manipulate their bubbles so that you can get better timing, stuff like that, and potentially force their Reinhardt back to clear a little bit of space and then work with that for your next set of cooldowns, like step by step. Or you need to work the map. And that's sort of what you were talking about with the high ground for Ashe and Ana on Gibraltar 3rd, where you can leverage high ground positioning to get around defensive setups by shooting like over them. Like maybe if you had, this is sort of an example, but again, it doesn't really pressure a lot because of this cover. But for example, if we had Tracer get in behind, or if you were running like a Widow and she grapples on the choke, having some pressure from this angle, means they can't just sit here anymore, and you sort of flip the situation on them where the longer they stagnate, the more pressure you're getting onto them over time. So then they're forced to either give up space, turn onto whoever's flanking and deal with them, or go aggressive themselves, basically putting the ball in their court. So from the situation, like I said, there's not a great opportunity to work the map from this angle alone. You could argue maybe up here you could try and get a lucky pick and go off that, but it's hard to land those. Obviously, it's a little risky, a little inconsistent, but it's something you can try to do. Again, you'll see Widows trying to land like grapple shots and stuff like that for the same reason, or trying to get sneaky shots here. Hanzos, Widows, Ashes, all of them. But if you're opting to run a Tracer in your composition, I would argue the best way to get through this is, like I said, use these flank pressure. Just commit all your Tracer resources to getting in, wait for them to come back, and then be ready to pressure as your team's moving forward. The only other alternative I could see is finding an advantage in the shield war, like in the Rein v Rein, like I said, with really strong bubble usage. But given that it's basically a mirror in terms of tank line, and they have more spam at their disposal, it can be pretty tough to make that work consistently. So either you're gonna have to play to build ults and find big cooldown advantage that way, or hopefully we'll see you guys working the map. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I hope we work the map too, but we'll see. I don't remember.
All right, let's see. So yeah, this is the kind of situation you want to avoid, in my opinion. So you can see Rein holding shield, Zarya shooting shield. We're not really getting anything done right now. All we're really doing is building the defense of Zarya's energy charge. I mean, yes, we're getting some ourselves, but like I said, it's going to benefit defenders a lot more. And we're eventually going to lose shield. We're going to lose bubbles. We're going to have to be forced to completely give up the space, completely wait for those resources to refill. And we haven't really gained anything from this. Bit risky from your rotation there as the Ana player. Yes, we want to go through quickly, but granted, based on where the Rein was, they weren't in a position to punish this. So if we want to make this rotation, I'd like to see it be like a team-wide rotation, making sure Rein is stepped up to here maybe, shielding as much as you can to make this passage through. But we do make it through as the Ana. So this is already slowly gaining space, slowly getting a bit of an advantage on the front line, forcing their Rein just a little bit behind this truck means we can take this space. So that's, like I said, instead of working the map, you can find these small advantages, work step by step, and sort of push their front line back with slowly better and better positioning. Huge cooldown on the Baptiste lamp. Our Rein goes down, but we found a ton of pressure, and look how free this Tracer is. They can't do anything about it. This is the problem with holding on this low ground, right? Like, even the Soldier, who should be the one person potentially able to mark the Tracer in this composition, most likely, can't do anything about Tracer from this position. And we're just getting free damage. They're forced to split their attention between the Tracer, between kiting. They're forcing them as 6 people to use all 6 of their brains, and they're not coming to the same conclusion. Zarya's trying to keep up pressure. Rein's about to die, so he's falling back. Soldier fell all the way back, but then still died to the Ashe threat. So really huge value here from the Tracer flank, and then good aggression, of course, from your Ashe to follow up. I'm not sure what communication sounded like at this point, but that was really well timed. So yeah, it's that easy. It's that easy to deal with the choke, right? Just get around it. Whether it's the triple blink across, getting around this way, whether it's even just in front of their faces, going this way, takes a bit more time to build up your cooldowns, but just stop them from looking in one direction, make them answer these different threats, make them think about having to kite while also wanting to stay aggressive. Good things will happen. Like I said early on in that fight, I think the honor rotation was a little bit risky, but seeing where their Rhine was playing, it meant that you did have that space to work with, so it worked out.
Yeah, I remember. I think like as soon as I did that, I was like, I didn't really communicate that I was making that rotation. I just knew that like we needed to make it, and so I did it, but I never said anything about it.
Gotcha. So yeah.
So you're definitely right that like we should have done that as a team instead.
So the benefit for having this space as the on player is, one, they can't push into this room. If they try to push into this room, then they just completely open up their backline. Even if like your Rhine and your Zarya get forced in here as well, they're just opening themselves up to Ash's sightlines. I guess just Ash's sightlines at that point. But if Zarya stayed back here as well, her sightlines, like they can't just walk through that space for free. So in order to find that rotation, do definitely look to coordinate with your tanks. Even like use Rhine going aggressive with bubble. Like say Rhine's bubbling here and swinging, you can use that time to get in here, get a good heal angle on Rhine, and make yourself basically unpushable. Unless they've got anyone in here, of course. Like if the Junkrat was spamming from in here, you probably don't want to do that.
Right.
But yeah, just look to coordinate with your tank cooldowns, because as soon as they take attention, that's your sort of opportunity to slip throughout the mid fight and sort of reposition small space at a time and find better angles for potential further aggression.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
All right, second point. Again, it is 2 CP, so it's a very hard point to fully close out. So we're seeing a somewhat similar situation where their front line is very far pushed up. They're contesting these spaces very hotly, but we're seeing an opportunity for Tracer to go aggressive on this flank and then either find point pressure and take their attention onto point, or find like a potential one-clip assassination on their backline. So as long as we time this properly, a bit of an awkward misstep here between your two tanks. Let's take a look. So your Rhine got booped onto that ground. Okay, so you were initially just waiting here to pressure forward, presumably. Your Ashe, your Ana, and your Mercy have the potential of taking this flank, especially now that Rhine's dropped down. But ideally, obviously this disconnect doesn't happen. But most importantly, we should not be looking for this aggressive movement until we see an opportunity for everyone to go in aggressive at the same time. For Tracer to go in, get attention at the same time. Rhine and Zarya are getting attention at the same time. Ashe, Mercy are getting attention at the same time. By timing our aggression this way, like we're all thinking about the same fight location because that's where all the enemies are. But right now, they're able to address their threats one by one. They're able to focus down the Zarya. No one else is getting pressured at the same time. After Zarya, they're able to turn over to the Tracer, or at least Soldier's able to turn over to the Tracer. No one else is getting pressured at the same time. So you really want to be able to manipulate their attention here so that they can't do this, basically. They can't just sort of play whack-a-mole with each of their threats where they're going 1, 2, 3. Trying to save it with a Shatter. At this point, might be a bit of a tough ask, but Junkrat does go down. Rhine finds himself really separated. Bit of an awkward angle for Bob. Obviously would have liked him to touch the point, but not bad. Still getting good fire in. They counter with a Riptire. And that's going to close out the fight. So actually, you weren't in a bad position to try and re-aggress that with the Nano Shatter. That was definitely a winnable fight. I definitely think it could have started out a lot better, though, obviously, without Zarya going down and with Tracer there. Just lining up the timing between your Rhine Zarya, between your Ashe Mercy, and between your Tracer just makes that fight a lot easier to deal with and a lot more consistent to get those ults out, especially something like Shatter. But I understand the desire to pull the trigger there, especially since we saw like all 6 of them all grouped up. Potentially winning fight. So again, we need to ask ourselves, how are we going to take this space? Are we relying on Tracer, finding a ton of flank pressure? Are we relying on better cooldowns to win the front line? Are we relying on getting meaningful space for our Ashe to find like a flank aggression, whether that's like up here, taking angles this way, whether that's we want to clear this space for our Ashe and then push forward off that. Make sure we're always thinking about these decisions going into this next fight, not just walking up and seeing where they are and then reacting to it. As the offensive characters here, you need to be thinking about what you're going to do proactively to force yourself into this fight. Luckily, Ryan kind of made that choice for you by walking up way too far and getting isolated. All right, let's go back a little bit here to right after that Ryan dies. And let's slow it down, actually. So we get the Rhine, but we get grabbed. So in this situation, it's sort of like, yes, we found the advantage. We found an opportunity to go aggressive, but they're answering it with a grab. So the timing we're looking for, Ashe is trying to peek over, Zarya is trying to go aggressive and clear the soldier. The timing is right, but because they countered with an ultimate here, we're sort of no longer at an advantage. They've kind of neutralized it again by, one, completely negating this pressure forward, so they can then deal with the Zarya, deal with the Ashe by hiding, and this is no longer a threat. So our tempo is kind of lost off that. Does that make sense to you guys?
It does.
It also doesn't need to be as obvious as a grav coming through to slow down your tempo. If you look at the health bars, this is something that's gonna more than likely come from your support players. But this is the kind of situation where you need to communicate something that we need to slow down. Because if we all keep the mindset that we're going aggressive right now, that we need to go aggressive to close this fight out, we're all just going to die from one-shots, every single one of these people. So from this situation, likely your Mercy player or your Lucio player, if you're running Lucio, whoever has the best view of the fight generally, should be able to identify these kind of situations and call for slow play. Call for a regroup, say group on Rhine, or play slow or low, stuff like that, wig cooldowns. Whatever you need to say to get the team to slow down here it's crucial if we're going to be able to snowball this advantage. You're on a really good spot, killing Rhine, forcing their grav out. This is a low value grav, even though it does slow our tempo down a lot. But more than anything, our health pools combined with that fact means we need to play a lot slower here. And I think Zarya going for this aggressive play on the soldier, that really seals the deal. We wouldn't have been able to keep both Zarya and Rhine up at the same time. But if that call came out to play a little bit slower, it would have been easy to manage both. And then yeah, the res comes through and that's a done deal. Remember, it's not always about just the initial burst of the fight, it's how we're going to take the extended fight. And that often comes with a lot of mid-fight adaptation, being ready to respond to whatever they're doing, respond to whatever's happening to our team in terms of health pools, in terms of cooldowns used, stuff like that. So yeah, really good early punish on the Rhine, like I said. It's just trying to pull the trigger a little bit too quickly off of that, based on what was happening. Alright, we're trying a new route. We're just gonna go around the choke. No problem. Small problem. I'm guessing you just didn't see this Junkrat going above you and get the one-shot comboed. A little bit unlucky, but should always be aware of your threats, of course, in these kind of situations. Don't expect them to just let you in, even just because they let you in the first time. Alright, we're using a lot of ults. Again, very good situation to start the fight in, but another situation where it might be dangerous to try and go too aggressive here, based on health pools, based on losing your Ana early, based on losing your Tracer early. This is a very winnable fight, but we need to stabilize first. Yeah. Stabilizing this situation probably would have just looked like getting back around this corner, letting Mercy res the Ana, going back in. If they try to push you guys through here as you're trying to stabilize, that's an opportunity to turn the fight. Let them waste cooldowns, let them give up space even more. They're trying to close this fight early because they started as a disadvantage, so they need to win it quickly, otherwise they're never going to find an opportunity to turn it. So just surviving that re-aggression from them, and then, like I said, stabilizing with the res, getting your tanks healed up. Great opportunity to snowball back into the point, hopefully clean up these late kills, and then they'll be forced to stagger onto point to recontest.
I know it's like an underrated thing, but I'm guilty of this, of not really looking at my health bars enough, because I trust the supports, but I agree, like it's, looking at it from this point of view, you're like, you're at 30% health, you should be playing slow to get, just to get recoup back up. There's no reason not to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, a lot of this communication, like because it's not just an individual decision to go aggressive or not, it needs to be a team-wide decision. Otherwise, you're going to go in one by one, like I've been saying. It definitely helps to have one of your support players communicate that sort of thing. Like when we're low, like not just an individual member should know they're low and be able to play a little bit safer. But if the whole team is low and the whole team is expecting each other to go aggressive and they're trying to support each other by continuing up aggression, it's just going to lead to a lot of feeding and a lot of unnecessary aggression when we're low and when we need to recuperate and slow things down a little bit. So yeah, in general, that's going to be down with one of the support players because they can always see health bars and stuff like that. But it can be anyone realistically if they see something that causes a tempo shift. If they use big ultimates like our Ryan gets grabbed, we probably need to slow down a bit.
This sounds so obvious when you say it, but like when you
trust
don't
me.
think about it, it like blows your mind. And
Yeah,
you're like, oh,
absolutely.
why didn't I? All I have to say is 2 words, and we're good.
The hard part is being able to remember all this stuff when you're in game. That's the real hard part. It's easy to like be in my position, look at it from a third person perspective, sort of like play chess in my head with everything that's going on. But then you take that in game with all these things flashing in front of you, with how fast paced Overwatch is. There's a lot to handle, a lot to remember, a lot to keep track of, and things are constantly changing. Nice punish on the Junkrat. Oh, but that's a huge grab. Luckily, this is in a great position for you guys. Nice. All right, look how stable our position is now. Our Ryan's a bit far up. Oh, can you stabilize? Okay, okay. So a little bit of a disconnect there. Again, so one of those situations where, yes, we had a huge advantage. They burned grab and we survived it, and we're looking to go aggressive. Ryan has nano still. He wants to get right up in their face. He wants to touch point. He wants to get as much value out of this cooldown as possible. But you do need to think about this ulting soldier up here. This is the soldier player, right? No, it's not the soldier player. U-tabs. When he was up here attack visoring your backline, even though you can get a ton of value from your nano and you're trying to push that value as much as possible here, it is important to remember this threat because overextending here and sort of forming these two groups, this group with no shield, leaves them wide open for this attack visor. And though it seems like no one exactly died from it, there was a lot of health pool loss and there was a lot of hesitation from the rest of your team trying to follow up. And yeah, this sort of disconnect is again one of those situations where a quick communication from someone on your team saying, hold up, we're waiting for this attack visor, wait a second, we need to group, can go a long way. And this can be, in this situation, because it's not health pool related, it can be anyone reacting to the soldiers, like hold up, deal with attack visor first, then we'll push in. But yeah, we almost catch up. And yeah, I think your backline members, your DPS members specifically here, could have been a little more aggressive given the situation where you were in. But I understand the need to, number one, dislodge the soldier, and also just play a little bit slower here. So not an ideal position to be in, especially from Reinhardt's perspective. But if we were to make this work somehow, we need to all in on that aggression. So I will say, number one, I don't think this split should have ever happened in the first place, knowing we had the big threat of the soldier up here. But once it does happen and you do find yourself in a position to potentially stabilize, we all need to focus on stabilizing our Rhine and playing around his space. I think having the Lucio go up here to boop the soldier away and sort of disrupt him for as long as possible was good, but I don't think these two members should be trying to do the same thing. Either would have liked to see Reaper go like really aggressive with his Reinhardt to prevent anyone from pushing past his shield, and would have liked to see Ashe take this high ground a little bit quicker to help Lucio with the duel on soldier and then take the aggressive positioning for the fight on point. It looked like a little bit of hesitation. Again, I understand because of the soldier. But again, we're committing resources in different areas, and we're not able to fully support each other, and I think that's the biggest reason Ryan goes down, even more than him splitting initially. So yeah, 2 CP, it's a hard one. Can you talk to me about the thought process behind switching Tracer to Reaper and now Soldier to Pharah here? Or not, it was Ashe, not Soldier. So now we're opting into almost more of a rush or a spam comp? So what's going on here?
DPS, you want to answer that?
I initially went Reaper just because the monkey, just to hard counter him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I went Junk just because we were struggling to get through, so I was just hoping I could get just a spam kill.
Okay.
And
So
probably build Tire fast.
I'm definitely not going to say like don't swap heroes in situations like this. I'm never going to say like don't swap to find a different win condition. The biggest thing I will say is as a team, when you are making even individual hero swaps, like even something like Mercy to Lucio, but especially something like this big of a DPS line swap, it's important to re-evaluate your comp and redetermine what your new win conditions are. So previously, where your win condition might have been to open up this space, solidify Ashe and Ana on meaningful ground, and then take the fight to point. Now your win condition becomes separate and isolate and essentially spam out individual targets, likely frontline targets. You're likely going to find isolation and a ton of shield pressure onto... Wait, no, there's no more Ryan. There's a ball. Never mind. But on people like Zarya, people with low mobility, like Junkrat potentially, and look to punish them. But that changes how everyone on your team plays, not just the individuals that are swapping here. So make sure that anytime you're going into these swaps, if you can, as one of these players, talk about what you're trying to do with these heroes and let your team work around those win conditions instead of trying to force these swaps without really talking about it and then letting people play the same way and then you try to adapt around that. It just makes more sense for a coordinated team to really nail down what their win condition is, what they're trying to do going into this fight before the fight even happens. So I would hope during this time we're talking about what Pharah, what Junkrat can do leading up to this fight to give us an advantage that we couldn't have done with Ashe Tracer, for example. And the biggest thing, obviously, is the amount of damage coming through. We should have a ton of frontline priority. Ryan's shield should not be even scratched by the time we're clearing space. So hopefully we can play around that. This Junkrat.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was playing behind us pretty much the entire game. Like, cause
Both their DPS actually. The soldiers over here too. So
we didn't
yeah,
get angles on him, and he didn't really get a chance to pop off until then. We actually went the way he was standing because before we went to the left and on platforms, and he was in that corner, so I didn't even notice he was there.
So yeah, I think probably a lack of communication issue more than anything. But as the D.Va player, you should definitely be looking not only at your Reinhardt, but what your other DPS are doing if they're trying to make plays around the map. If they're going aggressive on flanks, you should be ready to try and meet them and isolate people when they find value. Always keep it in the back of your mind because you are so mobile, so versatile in terms of your kit. You got to make the most out of it. Yeah. Again, I think we're just forcing the point too much. I can see that from our front line trying to go really fast, not dealing with these split threats that were definitely very punchable. We're rushing things a little bit too much here. And just like on first point, when I mentioned if you're holding high ground as defenders, like on this first point, and you're shooting down onto them, this is a very risky route to take. These are very risky routes to take. Point's very exposed. Slightly less punishing on second point here, but just as relevant, where if you just force movement towards point like this in a very linear way without clearing out these threats that are coming in off side angles, there was even like a soldier like back here, I think, then you're just walking into these free line of sight pressures from the enemy team. And while you will get a bit of point pressure, you'll get your Rhine on point, you're not going to be able to stabilize from this point onward. So unless you're rushing down, getting to point, rushing a single target that's on point, like maybe trying to punish a tank or something with like a Reaper comp or a Mei comp, rushing people down, you're not going to find a ton of value with this type of play, not with these kind of DPS, not with this team comp in general, I would say.
Can you add Sunny? She's in the waiting room. She just joined.
Hello, welcome. So yeah, the biggest thing from what I'm seeing is just trying to pull the trigger a little bit too fast. Like I said, not waiting for those key moments to stabilize when you needed them, not identifying your split threats and turning on them, playing a little bit slower with your main tank, keeping space without giving it up, but not trying to push more space when you're dealing with these split threats. Just a little bit of hesitation would go a long way there. Or maybe not hesitation is not the right word, but a little bit of little bit of patience. All right, last fight situation. We get them to overcommit at the choke, and this is looking not bad. All right, so let's go back really quick and look at how we got through. So definitely a misplay from them to grab this aggressively when realistically they can't focus from more than one angle. Like Soldier can try to go aggressive here, but that's really risky for him. So this grab finds no value. It also gets countered by Shatter, Beat, and Coalescence. So we've got a lot of resources we're pumping into this fight. It's last fight, so it makes sense. We're able to deal with the Soldier and the split threat, even though... Can you turn that down, please? Thank you. Even though our front line is very focused. Again, I would like to see D.Va being ready to deal with these kind of threats, but the Beat and the Coalescence cover our McCree taking this duel no problem. So it doesn't get punished here. We find early and clear advantages by taking down both DPS. They've got no way of stabilizing this fight, and the members that are touching point aren't going to be able to get onto our priority members like our McCree, like our Moira, like our Junkrat. So this is a really great position to be in. Granted, off the back of them overextending, but we've handled this fight pretty well so far. Get a bit of a better view here. Bit of a risky fade from our Moira player. Yeah, I'm not sure about this one. Keep in mind...
I gotta be honest, it's all pixelated. I don't know where I am.
Oh, okay, so we went from here, we got low, and we faded over here. Here, I'll rewind a bit and zoom in.
If you pull the stream up too, you can see, yeah, because sometimes Tickety, your stream on Discord, it's pixelated like really bad.
Sorry about that. It's probably because I'm streaming to both at the same time.
Right, yeah, you're good. Yeah. That's why I have both screens pulled. I actually have two of them up.
So yeah, as the Moira here, you get low, you're trying to get through these mines, but you're pushing into the enemy zone right now. So they have this space, we have this space, and we're both trying to fight towards point. This is a really hectic screen to look at. But by pushing aggressively yourself into the space, yes, you're going to be able to cover aggression if your team were backing you up. But from what I can tell, your team was not ready to go aggressive with you, and you get put in this position where you just get beamed down by Zarya. So that kind of follow-up should be definitely off the back of someone like your Rhine or your D.Va calling to go aggressive, and then you can support them. But if the pressure isn't on the moment you're out of fade, you're just going to get melted like we saw. So okay. I like the aggressive call because we need to kill these people if we're going to finish out the fight on point. We need to keep our foot on the gas. We can't just try and stay on point, let them stabilize, and let them come back into it. We do need to push to this advantage, but you should not be the first one in as Moira. That's the only thing. And I think if you just waited like half a step there for your Rhine to go in first, or even for some of the mines to be cleared, it would have been a lot easier to follow up. And yeah, obviously 2 CP spawns. It's a rough time. So we were in a decent spot to punish. The amount of ults we used definitely covered a few of the similar mistakes we've been making previously, not fully addressing split threats and... Well, that was really the biggest thing, and rushing to point a little bit too early. But because we had Beat going, because we had Cole going, we got to cover those weaknesses. But then we got stalled out by mines on the point. We ran out of resources because we used everything to break through the choke, and then we desynced a little bit in terms of going aggressive to try and close out the fight. So
I do have
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So we kind of had a little argument about this fight in particular. Because if you go back a little bit with that high charge Zarya, obviously we know that she's a high priority and she needs to be taken care of. But how many do we like? Obviously, we have someone has to stay on point because it's overtime. But how do we determine like who stays on point versus going like does one person on point, everyone else goes after her? Like how do we like establish that? Because we knew that she was the problem. You can see where all of us are focusing her, but none of us are committing fully to her. And I just, and I know we had a little bit of an argument over that as what we were supposed to do. So I just want to see if you could clarify what the ideal situation would be.
From this position right here, right as the mines are coming out, I think I'd like to see your Ryan go aggressive and your D.Va be the point marker.
Okay.
This would enable one, like much easier follow-up onto the Zarya. One, because you've got Shield and not Matrix to deal with Zarya, which is much better at dealing with the beam. And D.Va can more readily help from on point compared to what Ryan can do. Ryan can sit here and throw a Fire Strike in. D.Va might be able to boost in Matrix, boost back on point before overtime ticks down, you know?
Gotcha.
D.Va is also a little bit less stable on point, but their focus isn't on point right now, so your most stable member, the Reinhardt, should be the one in their face. This is where they're trying to stabilize, so Reinhardt should be the one pressing that advantage, versus D.Va, who would be able to follow up as well, but again, can't offer as much in terms of dealing with the Zarya herself. And honestly, at this point, at this specific frame, with Zarya around the corner here, you're probably better off not forcing that engage until she steps back up.
And that's what I was thinking as the Reinhardt player too. Like, I knew that Zarya was around the corner, so I wasn't going to press her too much harder, because she was already like near the health pack, so there was really no point in pressing her any farther than that.
So yeah, actually, that's a good point too. So the other option from this situation is obviously try to stabilize on point, bait them to try and recontest. Again, they're not forced to because they have 3 ticks they can give up if necessary. But if they start overstepping and trying to get value on point, their Moira and their Zarya specifically, then you look for opportunities to regress. So while I do agree, I still stand by Ryan should be the one marking and pressuring the Zarya. It doesn't need to happen at this instance. And I think you technically made the right call. It's just a very rough spot to be in with the low resources you did have. It's a very hard fight to stabilize, and then the sort of splitting we ended up doing doesn't help either. So yeah, I think number one, we focus on this side of the point with both of our tanks. We stabilize resources to deal with these mines first. We bait them to coming back to point because, again, we are contesting the point. Ball's marking it, but we can also focus him down at the same time that we're stabilizing. As soon as anyone steps up to deal with the point, this Zarya, this Mercy, this Moira, then we turn our focus to going aggressive and closing out the fight. If this doesn't happen, if they're like a really good team, they won't even try until they know they've got numbers coming in from other angles as well. But this Zarya was going fairly aggressive, and would have put herself in a punishable position at this point if we were at like full resources and ready to commit together. But yeah, D.Va losing mech, McCree staying a bit further back, Junkrat being the only follow-up makes it hard to kill, and then we've overstepped a little bit trying to close out the fight, and then lack the resources to stabilize. So rough spot, honestly. Not a whole lot you could have done differently. Just maybe save. Oh, that's not what I want. Maybe saved an ultimate from the choke. If we only beated didn't coalescence, for example, then we had coalescence to try and close out the fight, or vice versa. Could have helped if we had something to deal with just the mines, if we played a little bit slower. All these little things can add up and determine whether or not a fight is won or lost. But I definitely agree that chasing this Zarya around the corner is not valuable, but you do need to be able to mark and pressure her when the time comes to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's kind of a complicated situation. There's so many factors going into this, so it's understandable to not have the perfect decision making every single time with all the things going on in front of your face. But use this information next time you're in these kind of fights. Next time you're in an overtime fight, keep in mind that you might need to play a little bit slow to stabilize, based on ults used, based on economy, stuff like that, based on health pools. But you should be looking at situations to close out the fight on second point TCP, because if you just stand on point as long as you want, they're going to find opportunities to come back and surround you on point. Similar, for the same reason we don't want to just path directly to the point on attack, they're going to find opportunities to take advantage of that.
Right.
All right, defense. So we've got Pharah, Ashe, double shield. So we've got a lot of spam damage. We've got a lot of choke pressure. This is a composition, if you are running the Pharah, I would recommend actually heavily pocketing the choke. Similar to having a Junkrat, but I'd say even more choke dependent than Junkrat. Pharah can use these high grounds for very safe cover, but once you get forced off this choke, there's not a lot of options for Pharah in terms of cover. You'd have to play maybe towards second point using this ground, maybe around the coast using these roofs and stuff like that, but this is your best opportunity to find any sort of advantage as Pharah is right shooting straight down from these locations. So with this composition, absolutely holding choke makes sense. And just by nature of having a Pharah, having the amount of spam that you do, it is reasonable to expect to find reliable advantages, similar to having a very spam-heavy comp like a Junkrat. In defense, they're expecting to be able to do this for free. Again, your biggest worry, which isn't present on this current team comp, is flankers getting in and taking pressure away from the choke. Who do you send back to deal with the choke? If they can't deal, who do you send back, to deal with the point? If they can't deal with it, do they just die and lose the duel? How do we handle people taking flank pressure and dueling some of our backline members that don't want to take duels? Stuff like that. That's the biggest question you need to ask yourself from these kind of, I'll call it like one-dimensional defensive situations where we either win at the choke or we lose the point kind of situation. But yeah, Pharah should find a ton of value here. Obviously a lot of stability in the Rein Sigma comp. And yeah, look at all this value. If I'm blue team, I need to think of a reason to get past this choke at any cost. How can I avoid fighting at this choke? And it's not going to be by Reinhardt charging. So yeah, as long as we're not opening ourselves up to picks, like something from an Ashe headshot, or a Junkrat one-shot, this should be a fairly stable defense. Our Rein's going dangerously low. Hopefully we can turn it off of that. Alright, what happened? Why did our Rein get so low? So the Junkrat gets in, and our Rein... So this is the situation I'm a little bit worried about. When you're forced to give up space at choke, granted, I don't think we were completely forced out. It was just Junkrat going in, and us not having control of, like, notably this space, most importantly, so you can pressure this side as well as support our Rein, means this Junkrat lives for much longer than he should have with 1 HP, and he gets 2 pipes onto Rein, I think, or 1 pipe and he gets swung on with Discord, as well as this soldier is pretty much unpressured, which leaves Pharah and Ana in an awkward position to deal with this amount of space lost. So, again, like I said, this is a very one-dimensional defense. You need to find advantages at the choke. If you're not committing to a fight at the choke, if you're committing to kiting back with your Sigma, with your Moira here, you're lacking the resources to actually find your advantage, and the more space you give up, the worse and worse it's going to be for Pharah, the worse and worse it's going to be for Mercy, and it's just going to lead to a bad time overall. So your Rein, I think, had the right idea in this situation, but any kind of split like this should never happen. So one of these two people needs to be communicating more about where they're holding, about what their intentions are for this fight, because I think this was definitely an overreaction to peel back for just the Junkrat taking this space. Like I said, being able to hold sort of this little square here so you can mark and cover this ground as well as pressure this side if you need to, as the Sigma player, for example, is very important for denying space from the soldier, denying space from the enemy Reinhardt, making sure Pharah has as much uptime as possible. Pharah and Ashe, honestly, because both will be pressured out once they take this space. But yeah, just that small disconnect is all it takes for them to break through. And that wasn't even anything like, they didn't even outplay you guys, it's just you guys got a little bit disconnected. Although, they're not taking any space. If they don't win this out immediately, you've got a chance for spawns to come back. Ashe is popping off.
Bob, do something.
Oh no, Bob. No! That probably would have been a really good opportunity to stall at this point and wait for spawns to come back, but now you sort of need to find kills now, or else yeah, they have a much bigger spawn advantage. So that was almost clutch from your Ashe. You got 2 kills and then late kill on the Zarya as well. If Bob had just landed right here, or even just like right here, if he's off point but still pressuring, it'd be obviously a lot more value than him dying. But you don't need to find like huge value from Bob. You don't need to hit a target. You don't need to completely deny point pressure or anything. You just need to get him in a relevant position for the fight. So I'm guessing you are aiming here or here maybe, but him just slipping in between, very unfortunate.
Feels bad.
On the bright side, we have Force Trance and Valk. We answer with Valk. Are we trying to win this? Oh my god, the Shatter. You guys are getting away with murder again. Okay, they're finally closing it out. I will say I think the biggest reason you guys were able to make this so close is because they did not fight for space at all. They strictly fought on point. Imagine how much harder this fight would have been if Soldier was up here. If they had Zen up here as well. with Soldier, for example. They'd be just completely untouchable. They'd be doing free damage. Your Pharah or your Ashe would be the only ones able to pressure them, and if they play properly, they can avoid dying to those situations most likely, especially when your Ashe is being pressured by tanks on point and stuff like that. So they gave you an opportunity by focusing so linearly on the point, on the objective. They left Ashe uncontested for so long that she found a ton of value, but it just barely wasn't enough to fully win it out. So number one thing is, if you're committing at the choke, commit together. Mark both these locations. Give Pharah as much uptime as possible because she's the one winning you these fights. Ashe might be the one closing out kills and finding a ton of value and getting like a ton of damage off uncontested as well. But Pharah is the reason they can't push through this choke. It's the spam from Pharah. It's the threat. It's the threat of displacement. It's the threat of damage. It's the one they're trying to focus on when they're bursting through the choke as soldiers, stuff like that. So make her job as easy as possible for this composition to work. That would be my biggest tip. But then once you are in a position to retake this fight, which somehow at one point you were because of how aggressive they were on point exactly, make sure you're lining up your reaggression timings. If Ashe is the one stabilizing and she's calling winnable, she's throwing Bob on point, if she needs to play slow, give up 2 ticks, make that happen. Make it happen so your Ryan gets back, your Zarya gets back, anyone gets back who can find pressure. Otherwise, it'll be the same thing as we saw in attack, where one person's aggressing, they deal with that one person. The next person comes in, they deal with that person. It took a lot of ults for them to stabilize, but I think a better team would have been able to leverage the ground that they did control, notably the point and this whole side of the map, to better kite out your aggression as it came in, and wouldn't have fallen victim to as much damage from your Ashe. But yeah, again, any winnable fight like this requires coordination. Unless Ashe actually kills 6 people, make sure you're lining up these timings to make everyone's job easier. Second point. So we're on Baptiste and Doomfist. I would argue it's usually better to try and save ult economy to stop what we call a snowball fight, where they cap first point and then instantly cap second point. Not likely in this situation because you all have fairly good spawns. No one died super late. No one died with like the point almost capped or anything like that. So we have time to take position here and pressure forward. But in general, saving stuff like Barrage, saving stuff like I'm not sure if you used Valk actually, so never mind. But Barrage, I think we were 80%. Is usually better in these situations than full swapping, unless you know a ton about what the enemy ult economy is and you don't have to counter anything. But in this situation, for example, it would have been nice to potentially save Barrage if in anticipation of a Grav play coming forward.
He's not here, but I'm assuming the reason why he switched is because they have double hit scan.
Mm-hmm.
That's my thought. I don't know for sure. That's kind of what I was thinking. Maybe it's why he didn't think it was as good. I don't know. Obviously, he's not here, but I was just trying to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's an understandable swap, and I agree. Like Pharah on second point here.
Too.
Yeah, again,
It's
it's the situation where like you kind of need to play this far up to get value out of Pharah, but in a situation where you're playing purely defensively based on enemy ult economy, which I'm not sure if it's something you guys track super heavily or not as a team, but being ready for these big ultimate plays, namely Grav in this situation, it helps to have a counter ult of your own. And right now we've only got Sigma ult building. We committed a lot to try and stabilize first point, so having anything in this situation would be better than having nothing. But maybe we can get value out of the Doomfist at the same time. Really aggressive charge. Again, smaller scale, but a little bit similar to our disconnect on our second point offense. Just by charging here, it's not that long of a distance, but you're inherently opening up your backline to this flank, and potentially this flank if they had anyone there, or if they had a flanker, stuff like this. So I think you're tunneling too much on the tank duel and not thinking too much of what external threats exist. So yes, you're going to completely shut down this Rhine. He shouldn't be able to play here too aggressively anyway, but he's playing here to enable this flank from his soldier. And if they had like an Ashe up here, it'd be even more punishing for you to go for this kind of charge. So not only is this putting yourself in danger by getting a little bit split from your team, but I don't think you're fully understanding the risk you're putting your team in by giving this soldier a better line of sight by putting all of our attention this way. Inherently, like as the main tank, you're sort of deciding the area of play for the rest of your team. So you're deciding by going aggressive on this Rhine, we should be focusing this Rhine. This is giving our team sort of like a timer to whether or not we win this tank duel and keep our Rhine alive and kill theirs, maybe even their Zarya, before their soldier can find value. Versus if we played a little bit slower, kited them in a little bit more, potentially opening their backline up to potential threats, or waited to go aggressive for when our Doomfist could get on this soldier, for example, and time our aggression together, or for our Ashe to do the same thing, it'd be a lot safer for everyone involved. So unless Ryan was in like a super punishing position, like if he was all the way up here and you charge him here, that's fine. But this small split, these two groups, I think is a little bit too far and a little bit too unnecessarily dangerous.
I think I do notice my intention was not to go like past the choke. It was go like the charge the Ryan into the wall to the left of the choke there.
Gotcha.
And I just went to a little bit too far into the choke. That was a small mistake, but my intention was to go left of choke.
Short charge it. Okay, gotcha. That makes a lot more sense. But yeah, they definitely overcommit their front line after that, trying to get the kill on you. Good counter ult with the Sigma. Not sure what the Zarya is doing. She's got a death wish. Alright, not bad. We committed Sigma ult, but that was good. We've built up a ton of ult economy now. We've got Bob, Shatter, and Coalescence coming up. So again, think about, similar to first point, if we don't win, if we're focusing on this fight at choke, actually let me just play a bit further to see if that's actually what we're doing. We need to be thinking about how we're going to take this extended fight. Not only do we need to think about how we or they, as the attackers, are going to open up this fight, but we need to think about how we are going to find a way to solidify our ground as our Ashe, as our Baptiste, and find our way back into this fight with potential aggressive moves from our Doomfist, potential aggressive moves from our tank line. What space do we want to work with on second point here? So the argument I gave on first point was that covering the ground around point, similar high ground sort of like this, was more important than focusing the choke because of how open the sight lines are, how easy it is to mark potential flanks and stuff like that. Do you guys think the same thing applies to second point here? Do you think it's better to play further back on these high grounds, use the angles around point to focus on point with your tanks anchoring on point, or is it better to focus the choke like we did on first point?
I feel like maybe because they had hit scan, if it would put both our tanks, and like say we tried to push through choke, it's hard to get those hit scan both off of high ground at the same time. So I feel like maybe being a little more protected on point and forcing them to get off the high ground to come to us, I feel like would be stronger in our that's what I think.
So the argument is, instead of fighting here, fight back here so that these hit scan angles aren't as valuable, right?
Yes.
For sure. That's definitely one thing to consider. The only worry I would say is this angle from right here, from where the soldier is, can also hit point and can be a little bit dangerous. And that would sort of inherently force us into this angle and force us into a single angle retake. But given that we have heroes like Doomfist who can potentially punish this when they do come to point, I like that strategy a lot. I like baiting their tank line in and then trying to punish their backline with someone like Doomfist. Anyone else have any other thoughts? All right, so I'm going to present arguments for both cases going forward. So, number one, let's talk about holding choke. Similar to what they did, they had their Rhine up here. They were ready to fall down and pressure this choke. This is really good when you know you can take frontline priority, when you know you can win the fight by dropping on their frontline and out damaging them. I would argue the fact that they're running double hit scan means it should be no problem for you to take the engage you want, because double hit scan is not going to do a great job of getting past your shield when you're positioning aggressively. Like, sure, Ashe can go for an off angle, but again, it's not hard to deal with that from this point. At least there's a ton of cover to use. You've got a big shield up here that can protect anyone if you want to hold all 6 up here. Maybe not recommended, but you could. And then you can choose when to go aggressive and when to use your front line the way you want to use it, and then solidify this ground for your own Ashe, and then your Doomfist can also go in from whatever angle he wants. So that would be my main argument for holding close. You can choose the fight you want as the defenders rather than waiting for them to take ground and trying to push the point. You can shut it right off at the source, hit them at these chokes, go aggressive here even if you want to, and follow it up by Doomfist. And because they're running double hit scan, same would apply if they're running something like a Widow. Basically, no high damage spam projectiles that are super worrying from long range, like a Junkrat, Afara, Hanzo, stuff like that. You're able to solidify this ground for a very long time, and if they try to take the spam war with double hit scan, you'll have much better sight lines to use, and you'll have enough shield pressure to solidify that space for you and your team. That'd be my biggest argument for holding the choke. But for holding space behind, like we said, we can bait their front line in, and we can try to go find answer aggression onto these hit scan members up here, like you pointed out. I think it was Sunny. This angle to point, it can hit point, but it's not a ton of value. Same with like if they were back here, we force them into a situation where if they want to be more aggressive, they're going to have to give up their favorable ground, at which point then we can reaggress. Or if they do try to keep this ground, we can find options with Doomfist. So we try to bait their front line forward by likely cutting in this direction, potentially even behind point, or potentially this way, but this is the safest. And then reaggress once they've split themselves, in a similar way that we split ourselves on our attack, where we saw how far Ryan got forward onto the point, potentially even Ryan Zarya together. We can either reaggress onto them while holding safe locations out of LOS from these hit scan members, or we can just run through them and then have Doomfist deal with these threats on his own. Those would be the two sort of like cookie cutter defenses. This doesn't take into account ult economy. It doesn't think about things like they have a grav coming up, they've got attack visor coming up, so we need to think about holding different space. But in general, those are kind of like the two general styles you'll see on Volskaya second, and there's sort of a bit of reasoning behind it. So here, like I said, you can take any engage you want and deny it even the initial setup from these DPS. But similar to Force Point, if you do somehow get forced off, whether that's by ult economy, by flankers, or whatever, then you're not working with a ton of space, and you run the risk of getting engaged on from the ground. Versus holding back here, you can hold safer angles for your backline. You can bait the enemy tank line in, hopefully forcing them to point. But you run the risk of leaving these people uncontested if you don't have an answer for them right away. If they've got big ultimate economy to just completely burn your tanks, you've got no one to touch point. And you've got a harder way back into the fight. Granted, with Doomfist or someone like a Tracer even, you can find those opportunities, but it's not as easy as it were to go aggressive if you were holding closer. And I think the only other thing to consider is if you were to hold close, you have to think about the same thing as the first point, is if they get someone behind you to point pressure, like we talked about, how do you give up space while still preventing their follow-up? And that becomes a very hard ask in some situations. But like I said, double hit scan, they're kind of forced to clear you out, and you can deal with that no problem. But, okay, let's get back to the game. Did that tangent make sense to anyone else?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, good stuff. So this situation is not a bad one to be in. They are committing ults, so it's a bit worrying, but we've got Coalescence to stabilize. And Ryan's walking up, and their soldier's going very aggressive. So I think he's doing this, actually, I think he saw the Doomfist, and he's just trying to run away from you. And he's trying to make this aggressive play happen at the same time. This is a pretty good situation to be in if you can kill this soldier. If this soldier gets answered, you'll probably win this fight out. If not, though, then they're putting themselves in to just fully snowball this point. Ooh, Baptiste going down is not great. And yeah, this soldier just goes completely unanswered. Killing the Mercy is nice. Sigma's living for a decently long time. Killing the Rhine, nice. Doomfist found a ton of value that fight, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough for just one tick. Oh no. Okay, damn. Doomfist finding all the punches. Okay, if we can stabilize here, we're in a good spot. We forced them off a point, they've got no ground to work with, they've used a ton of ults, so they got nothing in the bank now. And yeah, they have no reason to continue this aggression. This is a bad call from them. Nice job. So, almost catastrophic, this soldier push here. But your Doomfist, I think going aggressive was definitely at the right time. I think I just would have liked to see better response to this soldier. Either clear communication. I'm not sure if BAP had lamp, but that would have been a perfect opportunity to lamp and just stuff the soldier in here with BAP and Ashe. Protected by the Coalescence, of course, if needed. But they were trying to go aggressive, and we definitely had the tools to deal with it. It's just the coordination didn't quite hit. But then retaking, brilliant job. Staying alive on point with our tanks for just barely enough time, and then Doomfist popping off with the punches, obviously.
We were very surprised to win that.
So how can we make that more consistent if we want to take another look at it? This is a long fight.
I mean, we definitely need our DPS like, I know typically DPS don't talk as much, but that should be a call where you're saying, hey, I've pushed a soldier, he's behind you, Baptiste or whatever. That's, I think that's something that, because if you got an Ashe and a Baptiste there, you should be able to kill that soldier if he is ulting.
I would say, biggest thing, we need to identify and communicate this soldier flank. It seemed like both of our members up here didn't even know he was there until it was too late. So that will come from either better communication or better forward pressure so that he's either not able to make that flank, or when he does make it, we have full communication around it. So yeah, this timing is crazy. So they're using the Bob to build point pressure and force you guys off, and that clears the space for the soldier. And then, as we're about to see, no one knows the soldier's even here. Easy kill. Easy double. Yeah, the Bob on point actually buys you a ton of time as well, which is nice.
Yeah.
But it's mainly the trades you guys found. Killing both supports, absolutely huge. Gives you enough time. Killing the main tank, absolutely huge. Bought enough time to recontest here. And yeah, even though you guys were forced to come out one by one and sort of touch one by one, the number of people left on point was not that big. They had no more ults to use to finish this out. They had no more supports to give themselves healing. So it was fine to absolutely come out one by one. And finding those trades was massive. So yeah, really good stuff. I guess something I just thought of that I didn't bring up before about one of the benefits of holding close that I didn't mention is especially when you're at an ultimate disadvantage here. Let's just skip past this. We already watched all of this. So if you're holding up here and they're using ults to break through your hold here and you're able to kite this out and survive, that's just one more resource or multiple resources that they've used just to clear this space that won't be there for the fight on point. So while this positioning puts you in a better position in terms of like having high ground, having kite potential and stuff like that for the fight on point, if you need to burn more resources out of them in terms of, it could be even something as small as like shield pressure or make them burn bubbles from Zarya. But most importantly, if they're forced to use ultimates to clear this space, then they're not going to be able to use those ultimates to either dislodge the people on high ground or really finish at the fight on point. So it's not going to be every time, but if you do find yourself at like a huge ultimate disadvantage and you need time to build ultimates, I would definitely recommend holding closer, give yourself more time to kite, understanding that you're going to be giving up ground when they start popping ultimates. You're not looking to take that extended fight because you know you're at a disadvantage, but it's a reason for them to commit ults early when otherwise they'd be able to save them for point, which is sort of what we saw when they bobbed on point. They tack visored on point. If they were forced to bob early before they even had this ground, Soldier wouldn't be able to follow up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to get that out quickly because I totally forgot to bring it up earlier. Nice late kill on Zarya.
So the situation that you called for, that would be like if we know if we're keeping track of ults and we know, okay, they have a grav, we have nothing to counter it. Let's see if we can fight them early. Is that just kind of based on the game, like how the game is going, basically? Because they need one tick and they have almost 5 minutes. So I think we have to make some kind of risky plays at some point. I would say.
For sure. Obviously you don't want to if they have grav, you don't want to have 6 members up here behind Rhine Shield and risk getting grabbed and then flanked or something. But having your tanks especially be more of a presence in the front line with the understanding that they're ready to give up space, ready to kite back to the point. because you want them to commit something to force those tanks out. It's going to buy you time to build your own ultimates, but it's also going to potentially burn a ton of resources that they wouldn't have otherwise used and would have had free reign to use over the point.
Okay.
There's so many resources to keep track of in Overwatch. Ultimates probably being the most obvious of them. So anytime you can force your opponent to use those and get out alive and take a better fight afterwards is always going to be beneficial.
True.
So I like this movement from your Doomfist. The only thing I don't like is the timing. Again, this seems to be the biggest issue with you guys, is lining up timing between your DPS members and your tank line. So let's look back even a bit further. So knowing that they have this space, your job, Doomfist, should be to try and disrupt, if not outright kill members on this high ground during the fight, right? That's the benefit of running Doomfist at this point on the map. So it makes a lot of sense. But going this aggressive when your tanks are still this far back doesn't make sense. It makes it very hard to cover. Even for your supports. I think Zen is like barely in range to harmony you. Baptiste is not in a good angle to support you. So if we want to make an aggressive play here with Doomfist, it should be covered by aggressive movement from our tanks, forcing this Rhine back at the very least, which clears more space for our supports to walk up and support this play for our Doomfist. It all works in tandem. The more people try to do individual stuff like this, the more you're opening yourself up to be punished, where you could have had cover from the rest of your team. So we're about to see, so Doom goes in first, and then Sigalt comes in afterwards. Almost gets a good angle on the Zen. And this is going to kill the Rhine. But imagine if this Rhine like didn't go low, as low as he did, which in all honesty, he shouldn't have been that low. I don't know how he took so much damage. But if he gets out of this alive, and we've committed Sigalt to try and cover for our Doom aggression, and we don't find any kills, then we've just burned a resource, we've lost a player, and then they're coming in with everything. So those are the situations we're trying to avoid. And those can be avoided by just cleaner team play, better communication about aggression timings and stuff like that. And again, a lot of this can start right from your decision of where you're holding and why. Again, their grabs are not finding a ton of value. Do we just try to bob inside here? That's such cyberbullying.
I missed my bob again. I tried to throw him on point.
Oh, okay.
No one.
I thought you were trying to like.
No one.
I thought you were just trying to BM this Mercy and Soldier. Yeah, probably could have saved a couple of these ultimates. Either the Bob or the Baptiste ult could have saved one of them. But we won the fight. We won't complain too much. We've got Earth Shatter still to work with, and we have the potential to build up Transcendence during this fight. So again, this is another kind of situation. You can try to pressure forward here in the attempt to build Zen ult. If we want to pressure forward, it gives us the opportunity to counter things like Shatter with Zen ult, counter Zen ult with Zen ult if they go aggressive with it. Doom's going for an aggressive play. I like this. So although inadvertent, this timing was like already better, even though it seems like it was kind of just lucky. Because they're timing their soldier aggression with their Reinhardt aggression, the counter aggression from Doom comes in right at the time that the front line is busy. So one, their backline has to choose between either supporting this or supporting this. And in all likelihood, you'll be able to find an advantage in one of them by splitting your attention this much. Doom is a much more bursty hero than Soldier, so he has got a good potential to win that duel. And basically, you're all entering the fight at a similar time, at least much more similar than the last time. And we're seeing... Ooh, if Doom had just focused that Rhine, it would have been huge. But yeah, Rhine's forced to drop his shield to try and regen it. We get a Shatter off. Nice. Going back and forth, but you see the amount of resources they've committed just to close out this distance. They're just touching point now. They've committed Trance, Shatter, they're bobbing now, they're Valking. That's 4 ultimates just to get from here to here, essentially. Now, we have an opportunity with Zen to stabilize, and then we've got aggressive ultimates coming up, Doom and Baptiste most notably, to regress into this fight once they've all committed onto point. And they don't have Trance to deal with it. They might have Grav up, they might have Tac Visor up, but they've used a ton of resources, again, just to close distance, just to get them to the point. And if we're able to stabilize from this and then build our own ultimates to go aggressive, we'll be in a really great spot. Ryan lives forever. Well, maybe not forever anymore. But yeah, during this whole time we just bought, we stabilized with trance, we found an opportunity for Doom to spawn and go aggressive again. That's how much valuable time and space can buy you. Because we basically went into this fight with no ultimates. We just had Shatter, I think. Yeah, we had Bob. Oh no, we used Bob late. Did we even have any ultimates going to this fight? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
But they burned 4 going from these positions just to the point, and that's the point I wanted to bring up earlier. It was just using space to force other resources from the enemy team. And all that time wasted by them and all those resources wasted just leads to us having an easy cleanup fight. Oh, go get him.
10 seconds remaining.
Nice. Good.
Is that a 6K by Rain, dude? Oh,
He's
it's
nuts.
Close to it, yeah.
And again,
Dude.
whoa, my screen is okay. All of that aggression from Doomfist was only possible because of how number one, poorly they handled their ult economy, but how well we responded to their aggression. So number one, first thing, the timing was on point, mostly due to them only peaking at the right time, but it counts for you guys as well. Having the tanks dueling at the same time that Doom is going aggressive just makes it easier for your tanks. Hopefully less pressure is coming through because they're having to deal with the Doom, and hopefully less pressure is going on to Doom because the tanks are so committed to this fight. That was step one. That led to them overcommitting their ultimates just to close the distance. They had to stabilize their Rhine. They had to try and find a way to go aggressive themselves, so they used all these ultimates to go aggressive. We stabilized, we cleaned them up, and then by the time all that was ending, by the time their ults were ending, our Doom was back in the fight. He was going aggressive again, isolating their Zen. Getting that kill was huge. Getting any trades, honestly, at this point in the game when they can't res, where they can't keep up their aggression anymore, is absolutely massive for stabilizing for you guys. We line up a few more cooldowns together. We get a good lamp. We get a good Baptiste ult, I think, to keep Ryan up on point. There was so many things that went right for you guys. I just want to make sure you guys understand all the steps behind all those things so that you can make it more consistent going into future maps. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So yeah, if I had to boil this whole thing down in a nutshell, it's all about manipulating space. From what we talked about from our first point, defensive holds, like how we want to hold and for what reasons, to how we're handling ult economy on second point. A lot of these fights start with the space we are holding. And there's a lot of different reasons to hold different space, whether that's to have an advantageous fight over the point, to burn resources at chokes, to find advantages based on hero picks like the Pharah on this choke, to even out ult economy when we're at a disadvantage, we hold more aggressive space. All these little things will add up and just give you just slight edges and slightly better chances of evening out these fights, finding ways back into the fight, finding ways to go aggressive, especially when you're on defense. And like I said, I think the last time we talked, it's so important to have these game plans going into each and every single fight. It came up again today when we were talking about like hero swaps. It's so important to understand what your team can do well together and what your team might struggle to do, and playing into your strengths, playing around the enemy strengths and dealing with them, but making sure you're going into every fight with a plan, making sure we're going into specific holding locations or we're taking specific space as a team for a reason, not just because, hey, I can play well over here, so I'm going to run over here, you know? Not just because, hey, I see the enemy Reinhardt, I'm going to push him. You need to think about how this space is affecting your team, how you're going to use it to your advantage, how you're going to force resources away from the enemy team simply by forcing space. And then everything else, you can just layer on top of that. You can layer your own ultimates on top of better space. You can layer your own hero picks on top of better space. If you got double hit scan or double sniper or something, it makes sense to hold these things. If you have an aggressive ultimate to use, it makes sense to hold more aggressive as defenders so you can go in and catch them off guard. Things like that.
Yeah, I know for me, that's one thing I struggle with is kind of micromanaging and like knowing like, okay, what space do we need to take to ensure that our supports can do whatever they need to do, our DPS or like it's something that I tend to focus on tunneling some where I'm just like, okay, like there's the Reinhardt, let's or whoever, let's get rid of him.
Mm-hmm. It's a very easy thing to do in game. Like I said, there's so many things going on at the same time and so many things rapidly changing. And honestly, you could make the most perfect plans in the world every single time, and like 75% of the time, it's not going to go the way you expect. That's just the way Overwatch is. So being able to adapt on the fly, being able to read into situations as they're unfolding, all very, very important. But at the end of the day, because you guys are playing as a coordinated six, you're playing as a team, you should be taking the time, and just being here right now is proving to me you are taking the time to coordinate these things outside of game, look at the game from a top-down perspective, be able to see all the moving pieces and how they're interacting with each other, just to give everyone a better idea of what's happening in game. Why did we lose this fight? From my POV, it looked fine, but then you look from the third-person POV and everything's falling apart. So yeah, if you ever find yourself tunneling, I advise you to always just take a look at the replays. Take a look at what you saw versus what your team saw, and what you were doing versus what your team was trying to do. Does anyone have any questions?
I think you've answered all mine.
Yeah,
guys have
you
anything?
definitely answered all of mine. Bap
Yeah,
isn't
don't
really
think-
one of my strong heroes, so like it was really useful just like learning
Okay.
like positioning.
The good thing about BAP is, like, I would say, like, think of yourself like Ana, but you can take high grounds whenever you want. That's the best part
It's
of
great, dude.
The
It's-
hardest part for most BAP players in terms of positioning is like how to use their ultimate, the window. That's becoming a little bit easier in the soon, and they're giving it a few more meters width. But
A few.
yeah, I would say just don't try to get like too much value out of it. Don't try to like squeeze too much value out of it. It can often be used just to buy yourself some space. So like if you were attacking here, if you just BAP alt main and their Ryan's right here, he's forced to give up all this space just off one ultimate that would be hard to use in any other situation. So yes, it can be like fight turning and absolutely massive, but don't try to force those situations if you don't need to. Use it as like a fight opener to build space. Use it as a counter ultimate if they overstep their ground, and then put them in an awkward spot by using it.
Okay. Thank you.
But yeah, I hope that was helpful, guys. Thank you again for submitting these
It's
VODs.
very helpful.
Very much helpful.
I love watching that team-wide stuff.
Always love providing content.
Our season starts, I think, in like 2 weeks, so
Oh,
it'll
fudge.
be. I'm sure
Very
we'll have some more
excited.
high-level games. So these are just comp games because we're trying to figure out us right now. But
Right.
we'll definitely have more high-level, like coordinated teams we're going up against for sure.
Awesome. Do you know if there's a
Starts
stream?
on 6 specifically.
Right on. You should hit me up if they're going to be like streamed or anything. If you guys are going to be playing on stream, and I'll watch.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think last year they didn't stream until the playoffs, but I'm sure like that one of us could stream if you wanted, whatever, or just
I mean, don't like hinder yourselves by trying to stream it, but
right. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, we'll
sure.
definitely because we're moving up a tier because we were in the tier 2 last season, and we realized that competition wasn't that great. Like we were one of the top teams in the league, so we were like, okay, we need to challenge ourselves a little more. So this is peak at 3750. So
Okay.
this is a lot. This will be a lot
a bigger
more
step.
challenging, yeah, because most of us are around 32 to 30, 35-ish range. There's a few of us are 37, but most of us are in that 3,000, 3,100 to 35 range. So this will be a pretty challenging league for us for sure. So that's why we wanted to have these VODs so we could just be better. We can rely more on teamwork as opposed to just having our Doomcast, for example, popping off. Like you can't rely on that every time. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
you
that's a
can't,
bonus. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't rely on that. You got to play as a team.
For sure. Yeah, awesome. Well, I wish you guys luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you
And
guys have any other questions or anything else?
I'm not smart enough to come up with any more, dude.
Shut up.
Well, if anything comes up with any of you guys, feel free to DM me, send me a message on Discord. I'd be happy to answer, help in any way I can.
Awesome. Well,
Thank you.
We thank you again for your time and your
course.
expertise.
All right. Well,
Dude.
till next time, guys.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Have a good
Have
night.
fun.
Next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.